Since you clicked on this video, you probably know of or don't care about being spoiled when it comes to a lot of the aspects of the Maker. And I do have many other spoiler warnings throughout, but fair warning. Welcome to Sandwich Reviews. I'm the Talking Sentient Sandwich, and I have been reading and treasuring Jonathan Hickman's newest Ultimate Spider-Man run. I got just what I was expecting, a new and fun adaptation of the classic Peter Parker story, but before I got into any of that, I was reminded of a plotline that, like most deranged comic storylines, was pushed from my memory. I highly recommend you read the newest Ultimate Spider-Man comic, so I won't spoil anything about that, but I do have to spoil some of the Maker's storyline. So if you aren't familiar with him, read the Marvel Ultimate comic series. There's a bunch of them, so I understand if you really don't want to do that, but at least give him a Google if you don't know him. For those of you who are still watching and aren't aware of who he is, the Maker is an alternate version of Mr. Fantastic, turned evil through countless tragedies. There are a bunch of evil versions of almost every comic book character, but what separates the Maker from a lot of those is just how much time we spent with him. Because the Maker isn't just a Reed Richards, he's the Ultimate Universe's Reed Richards. I really hope they do this in the movies, so if I'm right, spoilers for pretty much all the Ultimate comics and Jonathan Hickman's Secret Wars. But before the Maker can be defeated by Molecule Man, he goes as far as to create a universe devoid of any superheroes. In an attempt to stop any kind of misfortune from occurring, he controls the entire planet from the shadows, making absolutely sure that he's the only powerful being in his timeline. He does this in a misguided attempt to bring back his family and overall happiness, but of course he is too far gone to actually celebrate his success. In fact, he's too far gone to appreciate anything. But why am I explaining the Maker? It's because I want to see him in the MCU. It is only thanks to other internet theories that this idea was brought to my attention, so check out those channels and articles for a much more concise version of what I'm about to say, but I still couldn't help but make this video. Most well known for introducing Miles Morales after Peter Parker's death, the Ultimate Universe was a new reboot of their characters, told in a somewhat grittier way. Not all of them were, but for the most part, Marvel was trying to make their heroes more real. Though it may have been just straight-up retellings of the characters' origins and team-ups, they ended up folding the entire universe into the main 616 timeline through a bunch of very complex, somewhat convoluted storylines. Like DC's Rebirth, the writers tried to claim that, unbeknownst to anyone, the reason why their universe's continuity was confusing and contradictory was because of someone messing with it. Depending on how well written it is, I tend to like stories similar to this, simply because it's an in-canon explanation. DC may have done it more times than I can count, but as long as the story isn't too self-indulgent and self-congratulatory, I really like it when they try to explain real-world comic progression with in-universe characters. While DC's Rebirth may not have been as clean a transition as, say, Flashpoint, I still enjoyed the retconned explanation that the New 52 existed only because Dr. Manhattan was dinking around with universes. Sure, Alan Moore was pissed his Watchmen characters got dragged out into another story, but Alan Moore is always pissed about something. Doing essentially the same thing as Dr. Manhattan, just more maliciously, the Maker ascended to a level of consciousness he believed to be more righteous. Initially, the only difference between the Ultimate Fantastic Four and the original team is that the Ultimates got their powers from the negative zone rather than cosmic rays. Reed Richards' story quickly diverges into something much more disastrous than I prefer to see, but it did lead them to making one of my favorite villains in all of Marvel, simply by placing him on the brink of madness. Yet, the only reason why the Maker can be so compelling is by building off of what makes Mr. Fantastic so fantastic. The best villains in all of Marvel Comics, by far, are Professor X and Mr. Fantastic. By being so callously noble all the time, they end up being more aloof to the real problems plaguing their teams. Always concerned with the bigger picture, both end up creating the majority of their enemies, either by accident or from their self-destructive arrogance. If you think I'm pointing this out as a bad thing, you're dead wrong. This is my favorite aspect of these characters, and something I desperately need to see adapted. It's hard to do that and make them infallible characters in a way that children can still look up to, but it is possible. I'm confident Marvel will do this in some way, shape, or form, simply because of their handling of Tony Stark. While he was still a fun character to watch and root for, he ended up creating a villain in the MCU over a half a dozen times. With that all being said, will they be introducing the Maker in the newest Fantastic Four movie? I hope not. If you're going to use him, introduce him in something else, preferably before that movie comes out. Or maybe you do want to save him for some kind of reveal in Secret Wars. I don't know. I just know that I want to see him. And because it fits Fant Four Stick's Negative Zone plotline surprisingly well, why not use that existing universe? Make that Mr. Fantastic the only survivor of some tragedy and give him the motivation to step into the MCU. As I mentioned before, I will always prefer in-universe explanations for the decisions the writing teams have been making. Just make sure you do it delicately. It can come off as genius to give a reason for the lack of connection in the newest phase of Marvel by saying it has all been the maker's fault, but it can equally come off as lazy, only being seen by the general audience as backpedaling. So if you're going to bring in the maker, just make sure you do it right. Because after 3 terrible adaptations of these iconic characters, I'm crossing my fingers that the 4th time's the charm, and we see comic-accurate portrayals of the Fantastic Four. If you're not aware that there have been 3, and you haven't heard of the unreleased movie from 1994, definitely look it up. It's a wildly bad movie, but a fascinating behind-the-scenes journey. Every version, except for maybe Tim Story's sequel, is made only to keep the rights. And while that may still be the case for Marvel's newest installment, I still have faith that this will be a loving depiction of Marvel's first superhero family. And if it doesn't work out, we'll always have The Incredibles. But I guess we'll have to wait another year or so to find out. And until then, thanks for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and enjoy a delicious sandwich.